Let's start exactly where you are right now. Perhaps you're sitting in a chair or with your feet firmly on the ground. You feel the weight of your body pressing against the surface. The sensation of firmness seems undeniable and absolute to your senses. This perception of touch is your primary anchor to what you call reality. It's what tells your mind that the world is solid and complete, but that's the first big lie your biology tells you. If we could observe what's really happening now, we would see something disturbing. We would see that nothing is actually touching anything at this very moment. The atoms that make up your body and the objects around you are empty space. Science confirms that matter is composed of almost 100% vacuum. If we removed the empty space from humanity, we would fit inside a sugar cube. Philip Dick realized too early that physical reality was unreliable. He intuited that what we call solidity is merely a force field. The electrons in your body repel the electrons in the chair with full force. You are not sitting, you are hovering on an invisible cushion. This resistance from electric fields is interpreted by the brain as touch. You have never touched anything or anyone in your entire conscious life. The sensation of a solid world is a hallucination generated by your mind. It's a way of explaining why you simply stopped moving in space. The stark reality is that there is almost nothing out there to be felt. There are only invisible forces battling other forces in the darkness. Perhaps you believe that your eyes can disprove this strangeness now. We assume that opening your eyes is receiving a direct transmission from the universe. But human vision is a slow process, full of biological flaws. Light hits your eyes and is transformed into complex electrical impulses. These signals travel through the nerves and need to be assembled by your brain. This processing takes what physics considers an eternity. There's a delay of almost 100 milliseconds between the event and the perception. This means you're permanently stuck in a version of the past. Everything you see or hear has already ceased to exist in that exact form. As Philip Dick already warned, our perception is a constant delay. If a light flickers now, it's already gone out by the time you register the flash. If someone snaps their fingers, the sound reaches your mind after the event has ended. Your brain tries to hide this delay by editing the internal timeline. It synchronizes the signals, so you don't feel the mismatch of existence. The reality you experience is a recorded and edited transmission. If your mind is already altering time, what else is it hiding? How much of your world is real and how much is just a user interface? We need to question why evolution designed a system that lies so much. For centuries, we believed that our senses evolved to reveal the truth. Logic dictates that seeing the world as it is would aid in basic survival. But modern science suggests that the exact opposite happened to the species. Organisms that perceive the total truth of the universe tend to disappear. Objective truth is too expensive for an average brain to process. The real world is too complex, full of quantum fields and equations. To survive, you don't need to understand the physics of a hungry predator. You just need to know which direction to run to avoid being devoured. Evolution didn't shape us to be scientists or seekers of truth. It shaped us to be survivors in an environment of simple icons. The brain had to hide the truth to save energy and time. It replaced raw complexity with easy-to-understand symbols. The trees and stars you see are not the world as it exists. As Philip Dick intuited that something was wrong, we live inside a mask. The world around you is a biological simplification to avoid madness. To understand this, look now at the screen of your phone or computer. You see colorful icons representing data files and folders. You can click on them and drag them as you please. But the file inside the hardware isn't blue and isn't rectangular. The reality of the file is a chaotic flow of electricity and magnetism. If the computer showed you the raw binary code, you would be lost. The machine lies to you through a desktop interface. It creates friendly symbols to hide the ugly truth of the hardware. Space and time are exactly that for human consciousness. Space is not a real stage where things actually happen. Space is merely your biological workspace for organizing icons. Physical objects are not the fundamental reality of the fabric of the universe. They are the icons that your brain draws to guide your behavior. When you see a red fruit, you see a useful data structure. This image serves to tell you that it can be safely ingested. The icon resembles reality as much as a folder symbol on a PC. We have been confusing the simplified interface with the real hardware of the cosmos. For thousands of years, we have measured icons with rulers and precision clocks. We thought we were measuring reality, but we were only measuring pixels. The probability of our senses showing the real structure is 0. This implies that our language for describing the world is limited. Mass and movement may simply be the syntax of our specific interface. If we were creatures with different sensory inputs, we would see another world. We would inhabit a workspace unrelated to our current one. We would interact with objects that simply do not exist for a human. This leads to a terrifying conclusion about our place in the cosmos. We often wonder if we live in a computer simulation. We usually imagine alien machines running code somewhere, but science suggests that the simulation is much closer and more intimate. We are the processors that render this user-friendly version of the universe. We are trapped within a set of rules that we cannot remove. The virtual reality headset is our own biological structure now. If we cannot trust our eyes and hands, what remains of our identity? When we try to look behind the icons, the interface starts to fail. Almost everything that exists in the real world is now filtered and discarded. The visible light spectrum represents less than 1% of the information. You ignore 99% of what is flying around you. Radio waves pierce your chest, and network signals bounce off the walls. Solar particles bombard the planet as if it were made of smoke. This data is real. It carries physical energy at all times. But for your limited interface, none of this even exists in the present. You are in a vast library, but you can only read a single page. You look around and assume the rest of the shelves are empty. You build your entire understanding based on a tiny fraction of data. But you are wrong to believe that what you see is the totality of being. Recently, physicists tried to force instruments through this hole. They wanted to see what reality looks like when viewed very closely. The interface not only became blurry, it completely broke down there. Trying to zoom in on the matter revealed that the background of the world is made of nothing. We expected to find solid bricks or tiny marbles of matter. We built giant machines to crush the icons and see the code. We wanted to find the firm foundation of everything we know today. But instead of rock, we found only ghosts and vague vibrations. Inside the atom, there is nothing we can call solid. The closer we look at matter, the less material it becomes. Everything dissolves into abstract probabilities and relationships in the vacuum. It's like enlarging a digital photo until the face disappears entirely. You stop seeing the person and start seeing only blocks of pure color. The face was never really there. It was a property of the data. The physical nightmare begins when we realize that the rules disappear. The universe seems to change its behavior depending on who is observing it. This suggests that reality doesn't render details until someone asks for them. As Philip Dick already warned, we live in a world of constant adjustments. There's something wrong with how you perceive the world around you. Observe your mind, trying to find solidity where there is only emptiness. This instability of matter is what keeps scientists on edge. They've discovered that the universe refuses to be real without a witness. The illusion is profound and woven into the very light that reaches your retina. What you call home is just a stage set waiting to be looked at. If your world is an interface designed by evolution, we need to understand what happens when we try to touch the original hardware. Our intuition tells us that the universe is an objective and solid place, regardless of whether we are looking at it or not. We believe that the moon remains in the sky, even when we close the windows and drift off to sleep. But quantum physics has brought a nightmare that Albert Einstein tried to combat until his last conscious breath. Einstein did not accept that the universe was a place of ghosts and uncertain probabilities in the dark. He believed in local realism, the idea that things have fixed properties and that nothing travels faster than light. For him, the world should make sense, like a perfectly adjusted and predictable mechanical gear. But Philip Dick realized too early that the meaning we seek is merely a layer of paint over the abyss. The debate between the giants of physics has turned into a silent war over the nature of existence. On one side, the desire for a real world separate from ourselves, where the gloves are already in the boxes before we open them. On the other, the frightening realization that reality doesn't make a decision until forced by an observer. Philip Dick sensed that something was wrong with this blind faith in the objectivity of what we call matter. To resolve the impasse, a mathematical test emerged that would forever change the history of our species. John Bell found a way to verify whether the universe has a hidden script or if it improvises in real time. If the world were real and local, the results should respect a very specific and rigid mathematical limit. But if the world were an interconnected and fluid illusion, this limit would be broken repeatedly. For decades, technology wasn't advanced enough to test this flaw in the structure of reality. We lived in our comfort zone, assuming that our measurements were discoveries of something that was already out there. But in 2022, the Nobel Prize in Physics delivered the death certificate to reality as we know it. 3 scientists proved that local realism is a mathematical impossibility in our current universe. The result of the experiments was relentless and does not allow for discussion or comforting interpretations. Subatomic particles have no defined values until someone decides to look at them closely. They are not small spheres of solid matter waiting to be found at some point in space. They are clouds of probability, ghosts that only harden and take shape at the exact moment of recording. This means that the moon, in a very real and technical way, isn't there when nobody is observing. It dissolves into a fog of infinite possibilities, waiting for a mind to call it back into existence. We are not discovering the universe with our eyes. We are creating its attributes every fraction of a second. Philip Dick realized too early that we are the unwitting architects of a prison we call home. Imagine a pair of gloves sent to opposite sides of the galaxy in sealed, opaque boxes. Einstein's realism stated that if you open the box on Earth and find the left hand, The other has always been the right. The information would have been contained within the object from the beginning, regardless of your curiosity or actions. But quantum physics has proven that the boxes contain ghosts that are neither left nor right until they are opened. The moment you observe the glove on Earth, the glove on the other side of the universe instantly assumes the opposite form. This connection is faster than light and ignores all the laws of distance we learned in elementary school. The universe is not composed of separate, independent objects floating in a cold, black vacuum. It is a single integrated system that reacts to your consciousness in an immediate and profound way. Philip Dick sensed that something was wrong with our individual separation from the rest of the cosmos. There's something wrong with how you perceive the world and feel like an entity isolated from your environment. The separation between you and what's out there is just another rule of the interface to maintain sanity. Below the pixels of perception, there's a tangle of data that knows no boundaries or physical limits. Wave function collapse is the moment when the code transforms into an image for the user. It's the processing of reality being executed at the exact instant you focus on it. If the universe doesn't render the details until you ask for them, it behaves like an efficient economy system. We are living in a structure that saves memory and processing power, keeping the background blurred until necessary. This efficiency suggests that we are not inhabitants of a vast, resource-wasting physical world. We are observation points of a system that only exists as long as the act of observing exists. Your room, the streets of your city, and the distant stars are potentials awaiting your mental command. The solidity you feel when you tap on the table is merely the system preventing you from passing through the icon. You feel safe in your past, believing that what happened yesterday is etched in eternal stone. We believe that time is a straight line that leaves behind immutable facts, protected by oblivion. But if the present can define the state of a particle, what does that do to the story of our own lives? Philip Dick warned that our memory and our past can be as fluid as our uncertain future. Prepare your mind for the possibility that even what is already past is not truly secure now. The structure of reality is being written and rewritten as you process these words in your head. The fluidity of time is the next veil we need to remove to see the engine of the simulation. Observe how your mind tries to cling to facts so as not to get lost in the fog of quantum uncertainty. The world around you is flickering between being and non-being, depending solely on your level of attention. The authority of your senses has been revoked by science, and you have been orphaned of material certainty. What remains is a naked consciousness operating in a sea of abstract and mutable information. The next layer of revelation will displace what you understand by cause and effect. If the present is a constant act of creation, the past could not be an untouchable and static fortress. Quantum physics has revealed an experiment that seems to break the most fundamental law of all, that of cause and effect. The delayed choice quantum eraser suggests that what we do now can alter what happened yesterday. As Philip Dick already warned, time is not a road we travel, but a web we inhabit. Imagine a particle traveling and choosing a path between two open gates in the dark. It passes through the gate and hits the detector, leaving a definitive record that its journey ended there. The event is considered history, and common sense dictates that nothing in the universe can change what has already been done. But if we decide to delete the information about which gate it chose, something impossible happens to the record. The particle seems to travel back in time and change the path it took in the past to fit the present. It's as if your decision today has the power to travel backward and rewrite the pages of a book already read. This implies that the past is not a dead file, but a cloud of possibilities still open. What you remember as childhood or as yesterday may be just one of the versions being rendered now. Philip K. Dick sensed that something was wrong with our reliance on the linear chronology of human existence. He realized too early that time is a tool for organizing the mind, not a property of the cosmos. Your life story is being curated by your current observation to maintain the coherence of your interface. If information about the past is altered or erased, the past itself adjusts to reflect the new truth. At this point, we need to pause and look at your own internal experience of time and memory. How many times have you been certain of a memory only to discover that physical reality told a different story? Do you believe your memories are faithful records, or do you accept that they are fluid reconstructions of your mind? Write in the comments if you've ever felt that your past changed while you weren't looking at it. This question is not merely an exercise in reflection, it's an attempt to map the flaws in your simulation. Human consciousness is the point where time gains direction and chaos transforms into logical order. If the past can be edited, then free will take on a much deeper and more frightening dimension. We are not just choosing the next step, we are deciding what we have always been since the beginning of everything. Philip Dick warned that the system's greatest trick is making you believe you're a passenger in time. In reality, you're the editor-in-chief of a film being assembled as it plays on the screen of your mind. The feeling of continuity is a collage of frames made so you don't notice the cuts and seams. there's something wrong with how you perceive your own history and your identity in the world. If time is fluid and space is an interface, where exactly is the original code of the universe stored? If solidity is an illusion and depth is a trick, our three-dimensional reality may be a lie. We need to look to the darkest and most extreme places in the cosmos to find the ultimate answer. Black holes are the archives where the universe hides its most dangerous and revealing secrets. When something falls into a black hole, we believe it disappears forever into a bottomless abyss. We imagine a point of infinite density that crushes matter and erases information from existence. But physics has discovered that the information of everything that falls in doesn't actually enter the hole. It remains stuck to the surface, as if the event horizon were a two-dimensional data shell. All the complexity of a star or an astronaut is flattened onto a flat surface of pure data. The three-dimensional interior we imagine may be just a projection generated by this outer shell. As Philip Dick already warned, the depth you see may be just an effect of light and perspective. This gave rise to the holographic principle, the idea that we live inside a gigantic projection. Imagine a can of soup, where the outer label contains a detailed description of the contents inside. In our common perception, the label is just a description, but in the universe, the label is the soup itself. The three-dimensional volume of the universe may be an illusion projected by information stored at the edge of the cosmos. You feel that you have depth and mass, but mathematically, you may just be a flat drawing. This perception shifts the center of our reality away from what we call the here and now. True causal action may be happening on a two-dimensional surface at the edge of the observable universe. We would merely be the shadows projected by this code, believing that we are the masters of movement. Philip K. Dick realized too early that we are the characters in a book that reads itself in the dark. Your sensation of being a solid body in space is the end result of immense data processing. The universe is constantly calculating your position, your weight, and the light reflecting off your skin. If this calculation stopped for a millisecond, you would simply cease to be projected on the screen. The fragility of existence becomes evident when we realize that we are dependent on a flow of data. Observe how your mind reacts to the idea that you don't have the physical depth you always believed you had. The strangeness you feel now is the interface trying to protect your basic psychological integrity. It's difficult to accept that the vast world is just a pop-up of information appearing in your consciousness now. The next step will reveal how this system manages resources so that the projection doesn't collapse. We are moving towards the heart of the machine, where information becomes more real than flesh itself. What you call the soul may simply be the name you give to the stream of bits that compose your being. Reality is unraveling before your eyes, and you can no longer return to a state of ignorance. The simulation engine is heating up, and glitches are beginning to appear on the horizon of perception. If we are a holographic projection, the universe must have a resolution limit, just like a digital screen. Our everyday view suggests that space is a continuous fluid that can be infinitely divided. We believe we can zoom in 1 meter to infinity and always find more empty space. But Philip Dick sensed that something was wrong with this idea of infinite and perfect continuity. Physics has discovered that space is not smooth. It is pixelated on an unimaginably small scale. There is a fundamental length called the Planck length, where the very notion of distance dies. Below this limit, there is no left or right, no up or down, only quantum chaos. This means that you don't glide through the air. You jump from one pixel of reality to the next. The smooth movement you perceive when waving your hand is an illusion created by the screen's high refresh rate. We're living in a discrete grid of information where each step is a series of micro-teleportations. As Philip Dick already warned, the world is a technical construct that pretends to be organic to calm us down. Reality is a mosaic of data that our minds smooth so we don't see the cracks in the ground. This pixelation of space suggests that the universe has a finite and limited processing capacity. It cannot calculate everything that happens everywhere at the same time, as this would overwhelm the system. To save energy, reality uses optimization techniques that any game programmer knows. The system only renders what is being directly observed, leaving the rest in a waiting state. This explains why particles behave like waves when we're not looking at them. A probability wave is much cheaper to process than a solid particle with a defined position. The universe keeps the world in a state of maybe until an observer forces the rendering of the object. Philip Dick realized too early that the world behind our backs might not exist as solid matter. Imagine you're in an open-world game where mountains and cities stretch to the horizon. You feel that the entire world exists simultaneously, but the computer only renders what's in front of you. The moment you turn the camera, what was behind you disappears to save processor memory. The quantum universe operates under the same logic of brutal efficiency, necessary for its stability. The solidity of your room and the existence of the trees on the street depend on your constant act of witnessing. If all conscious beings on the planet were to look away at the same time, the world would return to being pure code. The laws of physics would be merely equations written in the dark, awaiting a mind to transform them into light. Philip Dick warned that we are the maintainers of reality through the simple act of paying attention. There's something wrong with how you perceive your independence from the surrounding environment. You see yourself as a guest in a house that was already built before your birth and your consciousness. But the evidence suggests that you are the light that allows the house to be seen, and therefore to exist. The simulation is not something external that you inhabit. It's something you execute within your own processing. Recently, researchers have found evidence that the universe may be losing information. Every process, every thought, and every movement in the cosmos generates an invisible thermal cost. Landauer's principle states that erasing or processing a bit of information releases heat into the environment. This means that thought is a physical act that heats the universe and contributes to its end. We are burning the library to be able to read the pages before the fire consumes everything that remains. Entropy is the measure of disorder, but it is also the measure of information being lost over time. The universe began in a state of perfect order and is slowly sliding into total static noise. Philip Dick sensed that something was wrong with human optimism about progress and eternity. We are engines of chaos that create small islands of order at the cost of destroying the surrounding environment. To keep your body functioning and your mind thinking, you export disorder to the rest of the cosmos. Life is a thermodynamic paradox that accelerates the clock of the end while trying to preserve its own form. Every second of consciousness is a bit that has been processed and can never be recovered by the system. What happens when the universe reaches its processing limit and memory becomes completely full? The end of the world will not be a fiery explosion, but an absolute freeze of useful information. It will be the moment when all bits will be the same and nothing will be distinguishable from the black void. The film will freeze on the last frame and the screen will remain white forever in the silence of thermal death. But before that distant end, there is a much more immediate and silent threat that could strike us. The stability of the vacuum in which we live may only be apparent and temporary to our senses. We may be living in a false state that could collapse at any second without warning. A bubble of destruction could emerge and rewrite the laws of physics at the speed of light right now. Observe your mind attempting to process the idea that your existence is a finite computational event. The discomfort you feel is the recognition that your authority over matter is an illusion. You are not the master of the house. You are the process happening within it for a limited time. The next part will lead you to the encounter with the ultimate observer and our cosmic responsibility. If the universe is a process of information that consumes itself, we need to understand who the ultimate beneficiary is. We often imagine ourselves as merely victims of a cold, mechanical machine that ignores us. But quantum physics places the observer at the center of everything, as the only one capable of giving meaning to chaos. Philip Dick warned that the universe is not something that happens to us, but something that happens through us. This leads us to the concept of the participatory universe, where consciousness is not an accident, but a requirement. Without someone to ask and observe, the cosmos would remain in an eternal state of absolute indefiniteness. The stars would not shine and time would have no direction to follow without the watchful eye of a mind. Philip Dick realized too early that we are the nerves of the universe trying to feel its own skin. Science has always sought the truth out there, looking at galaxies and particles from a distance. But now we realize that there is no single view from nowhere or a divine and neutral perspective. Every fact we know is relative to who observes it and to how the question was posed to the system. Reality is a constant dialogue between the questioner and the field of infinite possibilities of the vacuum. At this stage of our journey, I need you to look at your own capacity for choice and focus. If your perspective defines the state of matter, do you feel responsible for the world you are helping to create? Do you believe your mind has the power to stabilize reality, or do you feel like just a passive spectator? Write in the comments if you have ever felt that your focus changed the outcome of something that seemed inevitable. This interaction is not mysticism. It's the direct application of quantum mechanics on the scale of conscious life. Philip Dick sensed that something was wrong with the idea that we are biological robots without any real agency. Free will may be the mechanism by which we insert new codes and new directions into the simulation. Every decision you make collapses billions of possibilities into a single definitive life trajectory. But this freedom brings a weight that most people prefer to ignore in order to continue living in peace. If we are the co-creators of reality, we cannot blame fate or circumstances for our condition. We are the architects of our own interface, and the limitations we see may be those we ourselves have imposed. Philip Dick warned that the greatest prison is the one whose bars are made of our own blind beliefs. there's something wrong with how you perceive your separation from the other minds that inhabit this space. Our interface makes us believe we are isolated islands of consciousness in a sea of flesh and blood. But if space is an illusion generated by entanglement, our minds may be connected at the base. Below the level of the icons, we may all be the same process, observing the world from different angles. Imagine a forest where hundreds of trees appear to be separate individuals, competing for light and water. If you dig deep into the soil, you will find an immense network of fungi connecting all the roots. The trees exchange nutrients and information through this network, functioning as a single giant organism. Consciousness may be the mycelium of the universe, uniting each observer in a single tapestry of data. Philip Dick realized too early that the self you defend so fervently may be just an avatar, a temporary construct made to navigate this specific interface and interact with other users. What remains when we remove the name, the history, and the memories that the system gave us to carry? What's left is the pure observer, the silent witness behind all the eyes that have ever opened. This realization can be liberating or terrifying, depending on your need for individual control. If you are the witness, then you are not the aging body or the mind that suffers losses. You are the flow of information that remains constant while forms change and disappear over time. But the system resists this truth because a user who knows the code is difficult to manipulate. We are reaching the breaking point where simulation reveals its true purpose and origin. The universe doesn't seem to be a place for things to exist, but a place for knowledge to be generated. We are the learning organs of a cosmos that is trying to understand its own internal complexity. Every pain, every pleasure, and every discovery you experience is valuable data for the total system. Philip K. Dick warned that we are being watched by what we are trying so hard to observe. The gaze you cast upon the stars is the gaze of the stars returning to you through your retina. The duality between subject and object is the last veil that needs to be torn for the final revelation. The authority of your ego is dissolving, and what emerges in its place is something vast and impersonal. Notice how your mind tries to reclaim a sense of separation to avoid dissolving into the whole. The fear that arises now is the interface's defense mechanism protecting your illusion of individuality. You feel you are losing your footing, but the truth is there was never any ground to support you. There was only your will to believe that the scenario was solid enough to walk on. The final part of this journey will show how to live with this perception, without losing the sense of action. We were not brought here merely to contemplate the flaw, but to learn how to operate within it. Knowledge of the interface is the key to the freedom that Philip Dick sought in all his visions. Prepare for the conclusion where the observer's silence becomes their greatest strength in the false world. We've reached the point where the deconstruction of reality leaves us facing an inevitable choice. You've seen that solidity is a force field and that time is a delayed edit of your own mind. You've discovered that space is an interface of icons, and that you are the observer collapsing chaos into order. As Philip Dick already warned, reality is something that, when you stop believing in it, doesn't go away. But what doesn't go away isn't the physical world. It's the responsibility of your perspective on existence. If the universe is a system that learns through you, the quality of your attention is your greatest virtue. Living in a false reality doesn't mean that nothing matters or that you should succumb to nihilism. It means that you now know the rules of the game and can stop being just a pawn moved by the system. Philip Dick realized too early that freedom begins when we stop accepting icons as truth. The practical application of this knowledge in your daily life begins with rigorous self-observation. Observe how your brain tries to label everything it sees to save energy and internal processing. Try looking at an object or a person without applying the labels that the interface immediately offers. In this brief moment of suspended judgment, you will feel the instability of matter around you. You will feel that the world is fluid and that your perception is the only thing that keeps it rigid and predictable. Practice the state of presence not as a relaxation technique, but as an act of cosmic vigilance. You are the sentinel that prevents your world from collapsing into a noise of meaningless and formless data. Philip Dick sensed that something was wrong with the automatic way we go about our daily routines. The system loves predictable behavior because it requires less rendering and calculation effort. When you break your patterns of thought and action, you force the simulation to work harder. You become a point of high informational density, an anomaly that the system cannot ignore. This is the true personal transformation that understanding false reality can provide. It's not about changing things in the external world, because the external world is merely a reflection of your interface. It's about changing the internal code of your perception so that the world reorganizes itself around you. If you change how you observe, what you observe will be forced to change to maintain coherence. Philip Dick warned that we are slaves to a collective hallucination we call society and culture. The bars of our cell are made of inherited concepts and fears that don't truly belong to us. By recognizing the holographic and informational nature of being, you cut the strings that move your avatar. You cease to be a character written by others and assume authorship of your own existential narrative. The impact of this revelation should be felt now, in the silence that follows the words you hear. Do not seek comfort or a conclusion that closes all the doors open during this video. The goal was never to clarify reality, but to make it unstable enough so that you can escape it. The doubt that remains in your heart is the sign that your consciousness is finally awakening. From now on, the world will never seem the same when you walk the streets of your city. You will see pixels in the shadows and feel the lag of time in the dialogues you have with other people. You will know that the weight of your body is an electric lie and that the stars are echoes of an edited past. This solitude of knowledge is the price of freedom that Philip Dick paid with his own sanity. Honor this realization by actively questioning every moment of your future existence. Don't let the interface drag you back into the deep sleep of blind and comfortable materialism. You are a fragment of the universe that has learned to see the very simulation in which you are now immersed. This is the greatest adventure a consciousness can experience before the system's final shutdown. This journey teaches us that reality is not a box in which we are locked from birth. Reality is a continuous process of information that requires your participation to keep running. Philip Dick sensed that something was wrong with our passivity in the face of what we call the laws of nature. We are the editors of the code, and our attention is the most valuable currency in this simulation. The responsibility that rests upon you is comparable to the weight that sustains the entire firmament above. If your gaze is what collapses the wave function, you are the guardian of the integrity of your own universe. There is no one outside the system to save your perception or to organize your inner chaos. The silent authority of your consciousness is the only thing that separates existence from total dissolution. Philip Dick realized too early that the fear of death is merely the fear of being deleted from a hard drive. But if you are the information and not the hardware, the idea of absolute end loses its paralyzing power. The code of your being is written on the holographic frontier of the cosmos, and nothing can erase what has already been. You are eternal, like a fundamental piece of data that makes up the basic structure of everything that can come to be. The simulation will try to convince you that your effort is futile in the face of the vast black void. It will offer distractions and bright icons to capture your focus and drain your vital energy. Resist the temptation to return to the state of biological sleepwalking where everything seems solid and guaranteed. The instability you feel now is your greatest ally in the search for a truth that is not fabricated. We are all caught in a strange loop where the observer and the observed mutually draw each other. No part of the system can exist without the other, and this connection is what we call life. Consciousness is not a late guest at the party of matter, it is the hostess who turned on the lights. Without its presence, the universe would be just a silent, dark, maybe floating in nothingness. Observe how your mind struggles to digest the magnitude of what it means to be a co-creator of reality. The weight of Atlas on your shoulders is not a punishment, but the greatest honor an entity can receive. You sustain the world with your interest and give form to light through your inexhaustible curiosity. Philip Dick realized that the secret is not to escape prison, but to understand that you are your own jailer. The true magic of this knowledge is that it doesn't require grand rituals or drastic external changes. It only requires you to change the frequency of your thinking and the depth of your gaze. When you perceive the plot behind the scenery, the walls cease to be insurmountable obstacles. You begin to walk through the empty spaces between atoms and hear the whisper of binary code. Philip Dick warned that truth is a dangerous creature that cannot be tamed by intellect. It must be lived in the flesh and felt in the gut like a chill that never fully goes away. The authority of your being now emanates from an understanding that needs no proof or validation. You know what you saw, and that vision is the only compass that truly matters in this ocean of illusions. If this content stirred something within you, don't keep that feeling to yourself. Your interaction is what keeps this channel a point of resistance in the system's information network. Like this video, to signal to the algorithm that truth still has value in this ocean of distractions. Subscribe to ensure your avatar continues to receive the updates the interface tries to hide. Comment below with your thoughts, even if they seem confusing or disconnected from common logic. Your account is essential data for mapping the flaws in the reality we share at this moment. We are not looking for followers. We are looking for other awakened observers who refuse to accept the current scenario. Your comment is proof that there is someone on the other side of the screen processing this code with me. The video ends here, but the observation of your mind should continue for all the time you have left. The false reality will continue trying to convince you of its solidity and material urgency every day. But now you have Philip Dick's invisible anchor to remind you that all you see is just a glint. Pay attention to the flaws, because it is through them that the light of true reality manages to enter. Keep your focus sharp and your doubt ever vigilant in the face of every icon that appears in your path. The system knows that you know, and it will try to distract your gaze with new forms of entertainment. Don't succumb to automatism, and don't let yourself be carried away by the flow of misinformation that floods your desktop. You are the master of your perception and the sole owner of the collapse of your own wave function now. Remember that the fragility of the world is the ultimate proof of your own inner creative strength. Where matter fails, consciousness prevails, as the only constant in a sea of uncertain variables. You're no longer alone in the darkness. You have become the very light that illuminates the void. The journey ends now so that your true life can finally begin under a new perspective. Philip Dick realized too early that destiny is merely the name we give to our own inertia. By regaining control of your attention, you regain control of your own existence in the cosmos. The false world may continue to exist around you, but it will no longer have power over your spirit. The sentinel has awakened, and the dream can no longer deceive those who already know the nature of the dreamer.